This episode is brought to you by Groove Washer, the best record cleaners and protective sleeves for your vinyl collection. Ask for the Groove Washer from your local shop or go to groovewasher.com. Discount code VinylGuide10. And now, on with the show.
Well, hey everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 345 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And today, nerd out we shall with the legendary Thomas Andrew Doyle, or Tad, as you may know him. Tad has an amazing history steeped in the formidable time when the music scene in the Pacific Northwest was percolating the music style that came to be known as grunge. And Tad was in the absolute dead center, releasing some of the most notable albums of the period, including God's Balls, Salt Lick, and 8-Way Santa. Lots of rare collectible records from Tad and team, and today we cover them all. Plus, we talk about some of the more current projects, which are very different and very much worth pursuing. ThomasAndrewDoyle.bandcamp.com is the place you want to go and enjoy his newer creations. The soundscapes, the dark wave-esque industrial ambient music that I foolishly keep referring to as classical music during the interview. However, don't be deceived. It's not what you may expect. Or maybe it's exactly what you expect, but enjoy the music and order some of the streams and even some vinyl at thomasandrewdoyle.bandcamp.com. And this may be Thomas's final comments on the Tad portion of his career. He shared this comment during our chat, indicating exactly how he feels on the subject.
And to be honest, this might be the last interview I ever do. I'm just kind of, I've had it with it. It doesn't really, I don't feel that it's productive for me to rehash all of the past. You know, I like to stay in the present.
So if you want to hear even more, there is an extended version of this interview, another 20, 30 minutes, something like that, available only to show patrons at patreon.com/vinylguide. Now, I'm not only putting extra interviews up there, I'm also making them commercial free and they're in high resolution, almost twice the bit rate that you're hearing right now, so you'll get a much crisper listen, but that's only if you're a patron and supporter of the show at patreon.com/vinylguide. Make it happen, man. By the way, if you like this episode, there are hundreds more interviews available, like episode 344 with Danita Sparks of the Mighty L7, episode 334 with producer-engineer Jack Endino, episode 326 with Matt Pike of Sleep and High on Fire, episode 305 with Dale Crover of Melvins, episode 291 with Milo Ackerman of Descendants, episode 286 with Erie Vaughn of Samhain and Danzig, episode 281 with Ian Mackay of Minor Threat, Fugazi, Discord Records, and more, plus literally hundreds of other episodes and interviews. Subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends, tell your enemies, and enjoy. All right, let's get into it and start our conversation with Mr. Thomas Andrew Doyle of Tad.
Well, look at you, Mr. Early.
How are you, man?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm assuming it is Tad Doyle. Everyone calls you Tad. Thomas, what do you prefer?
Whatever you want to call me. Just don't call me late for dinner.
Okay, I'm going to call you Tad just because for years and years I've known you as Tad. Look, for years I kind of thought I knew the artist Tad Doyle. Just observing your music in my formative years. However, in recent times I've come across your classical works, and I think experiments of the Spectral Order, Incineration Ceremony, and I found myself revisiting my preconceived notions of you. None of them were bad. I think they were just limited, which I imagine that reaction is pretty common for you these days. Would that be true?
Sure. Yeah. Short answer, yes. There's a lot of things coming down the pipe that are going to be throwing more loops and more derailings of ideas of who they think I am, who people think I might be.
You going for a battle rapper or anything like that?
No. No, but that's an interesting idea.
I mean, and look, I've been fully enjoying the classical works. Again, unexpected, but also very beautiful, very compelling, very captivating. I mean, how long have you had visions of creating that sort of music?
Well, it kind of happened by accident. I did go to a university in Boise State University in Idaho, and I studied music. That was my major. So I have a formal background, and I played in bands and orchestras all throughout my life since fifth grade. I just it wasn't I didn't know it was going to happen. It just started happening. I have a friend that I talk to frequently. He's a composer that lives back east. He has his own record label. He says, well, you like that, you should check out this. So we started exchanging ideas to stuff to listen to, and I just kind of got into it by accident. And to be honest, I had the most fun I've ever had writing music was doing this type of stuff. I would wake up in the morning, and I work from home, so my wife would be busy doing her things, and I would be laughing out loud by 11 o'clock in the morning, just going, oh, this is so fun, So that's the first record, Incineration Ceremony, that I got a lot of enjoyment out, and each successive record as well.
I do want to talk about these releases a bit more, but the theme of the show here is the Vinyl Guide. We're record nerds, we're collectors. First off, are you a record collector or a music collector? Do you have memorabilia you've kept over the years?
Not really. I had a heartbreaking experience which kind of broke me of carting around a bunch of vinyl, and one of them was that when I was living in Boise, I was living in a group house with a bunch of other musicians, and we had a hell of a party one night because we knew we were moving out. And there wound up being a lot of damage to the house, and we had to pay and fix for it. But I had every single Frank Zappa record since the beginning in a collection, and it somehow slipped through the cracks, and it didn't make it out of the house, and I was heartbroken when I realized that. So that's my experience with record collecting.
Have you kept all of your test pressings? I imagine you have copies of everything that you've done as a musician, yeah?
Yes, I do have all that, and not a whole lot of it, but I managed to keep test pressings of everything, and at least one or two copies. And I've given away a lot of it throughout the years, but I've kept one or two copies just for lack of, just to do it, to keep it.
Yeah.
I figure I'll give it to one of my relatives. My brother had kids and my sister had kids, but I don't have any children, so we'll probably wind up going to them.
Yeah. Give them the record collection. Give them that whole problem to deal with after you're gone.
Exactly.
So in terms of your own music, I believe the first time you were on record was the Daisy Ritual Device single. Is that correct?
Partially. I was on a record compilation that was put out by CZ Records, which used to be, I think, a guy from Skin Yard, who was with Jack and Dino, and it was called, no, it wasn't Deep Six. It was something. Oh, it was called Secretions. Okay. And I played drums with my band H-Hour. Mm-hmm. And that was the first vinyl recording that I'm aware of that I'm on. And then there's the Daisy Ritual Device single that came out on SubPop was the probably the first collector's version. It was a clear vinyl and with a clear packaging. It was pretty exciting.
I imagine. Yeah, there was also apparently 70 of those pressed on gold records. Do you recall?
Yes, yes, I do. In fact, I call them urine yellow, but that's just the punk rock in me. I do know that there's, on I forget what it's called, the inside of at the end of the record per side, there's always some code that's written by the pressing plant and whatnot.
Yep.
And we always had fun with those as the band Tad. There's special weird messages that are in there, and if anybody found them, I don't know if, for the nerds, if they're aware of that stuff.
Oh, we find them. Do you remember the one that was on Daisy Ritual Device?
I don't recall. I know it was on God's Balls though. And
okay.
It was Jesus' side and Judas' side.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe something else. I can't remember. Free Dick Johnson or something like that.
I want to ask you about Dick Johnson, because that theme goes through multiple records. Who is Dick Johnson?
Well, it was kind of like a fictitious character, but it actually was the bass player, Kurt Danielson's. He was married to a woman at one point, and her name was Johnson, was her last name. And her brother was named Richard Johnson. And so when we went on tour with Pussy Galore, that was the first U.S. tour that we did with that band. We had him along, and he was kind of like our make shit happen guy. He would help us move gear. He would make sure we were taken care of. He personified a sleazy manager type, But and Pussy Galore fell in love with that idea, and of course Dick Johnson as well, and wrote a song about him. So we made this whole mystique story to go along with Dick, and he wound up in prison for some reason, and this never happened, but it's kind of part of the story. And we were always like trying to get Dick out of jail. And, it's kind of funny that his name was like, kind of like penis and
penis.
Yeah.
Well, Johnson.
Yeah. So it was just more things to make us laugh, and Pussy Galore liked that. We all had a lot of laughs surrounding that.
By the way, the etching on the runout groove of Daisy and Ritual Device, sharp knives make the butcher sing.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Yep.
Any story behind that?
Well, I was a butcher. I was a meat cutter back in Boise as well.
This is true, right? You're not making some story.
No, this is an absolutely true fact. I worked at Albertsons supermarkets way back when, and I hated that job, and I became a journeyman butcher, and it was just a miserable experience for me. I didn't like the feeling of a knife going through strands of muscle, and it really messed with my head a lot. But I did it for a solid 5-6 years, and said, "Fuck this, I'm out." And that's when I moved to Seattle with my band, who was originally from Boise. So sharp knives do make the butcher sing.
Actually, you guys did a split with Pussy Galore as well, didn't you? Was that there was a Black Flag theme?
Yeah, we both covered Black Flag songs, and that was another common thing we shared that we loved. And interesting thing is I think we did Damage 2 or Damage 1. I can't remember which, but the riff kind of sounded like an AC/DC song as well. So we segued into the AC/DC song that Damage song sounded like, and probably to the horror and chagrin of a lot of people all at the same time.
Now, at that point in time, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that was on one of the SubPop singles. What was the engagement, the reach of SubPop at the time? Was SubPop still that, very, very much the underground label that was struggling to meet its payments, or was it starting to really gain traction by that time?
Well, they were certainly gaining momentum all along the way, and then it certainly skyrocketed with the advent of Nirvana being blowing up like they did, and that really, them and Soundgarden, who are both early Sub Pop stalwarts, definitely put a lot of, Sub Pop makes jokes about going out of business since they started.
Mm-hmm.
We've been going out of business since this date, but it's true, man. They had some rough years, and like you said, hard making payments, and they're like robbing Peter to pay Paul all the times. And I remember Jonathan was like kind of brokering art to make some money to even stay afloat for another week or two at times,
Mm-hmm.
But they hung in there, and they had vision, and they stuck with it, which is really what you got to do if you believe in what you're doing, and they certainly did.
Now, being in the middle of that, what became this big cultural moment, did you recognize it was special at the time, that something unique was happening there, or you could only kind of appreciate it kind of looking back?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I don't really have an outside perspective, because I was in it pretty much from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and I just knew these people. I knew these guys. We'd go to each other's shows, and, it was fun as hell to see Soundgarden playing a 50-person venue on a Tuesday night, and one of my bands opening for them, and we'd be lucky if there was 25 to 30 people there. And it was mostly other bands coming to see other bands.
Right.
In the early days. So it's not, it's kind of changed. I know that Seattle's, it's becoming metropolitan or whatever, and probably has for a while. But when we were first here, when I first rolled into town with my band, I remember Mark Arm saying, "This is just a big farm community," and he was right, but it has definitely changed.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of outside influence, because, like I say, at those days, the internet was not even around or even existing. So it was like, if you were a record collector, you would correspond through mail, postal, with other people. And Mark was very good at that, Mark Arm. I've never been one of those people that writes letters.
So when you got to Seattle, as I understand, you saved up money, or you had a tax return, or a windfall of money, and decided to record some of the songs that you had been working on, which some of them wound up on that first single. Those songs, were those songs that you thought at some point you would play with others, and this was just your way of expressing it? Or what was the intent? What was the motivation behind just going in and recording those songs?
Well, the intent is that I was going to go out and play live shows and tour. That's what I really wanted to do. And I thought I could do it by myself. And I had a plan. Originally, I started with a drum machine. I had a drum machine that I used, and I would play my guitar and vocalize with it. And I had an old Korg SQD1, I think it was called. It was a digital sequencer, and I had this TX7 module, which was like remember the 80s DX7?
Yeah, it was
keyboard,
the FM synthesis.
Yeah, and that wound up being on every record. But I found that I could sequence a bass part and put it through a distortion pedal, and I just, my plan was I was going to go out and be on tour by myself, load in stuff. But then I found quickly that soundman didn't like to turn up the drum machine as loud as it should be. In those days, at least, the ones that I've been working with at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that really pissed me off, because drums for the kind of music I was doing, drums has to move your innards. It's got to shake you. It's got to, make things happen. So it was very disheartening. And I go, well, I'm going to do this no matter what. But I said, man, it's just going to be easier if I find some people to support my vision. And that's essentially what happened after the first single. I was friends with a guy named Kurt Danielson, who was in a band called Bundle of Hiss. And we were always playing shows together with his band. And so I said, man, you want to play together or something? And he said, yeah, sure. And I knew a drummer who wound up being Steve Wiederhold. And he knew a guitar player. And we just got together, and I started showing him ideas, and Kurt had some ideas, and Gary had some ideas, and we just started making it happen. And then 2 weeks later, we went in and recorded God's Balls. That was our first record. And we'd only been together for like two or 3 weeks at the most as a band. We were focused. I mean, we were focused, and we loved doing what we're doing, and it was fun. And that's all I was going to say.
Mm-hmm. So early on, you had all the control of your songs, all your writing and everything that went into them, especially that first single. You played everything. Then you went to the band Tad, which had multiple contributors, as you've said. Was the end result of God's Balls, how satisfied were you with what the band had produced? Did you feel frustrated at all about not having all the control you used to have, or were you very happy with what you came out of that with?
No, I was ecstatic. And the thing is like, all those guys were like really good players, and they understood the direction that I was coming from, and they were able to articulate and put into music what we had talked about. And it was magical. It's one of those things that you get people together as musicians, and that magic happens when they're all together, like, and I'm not comparing us to anybody, but things like the Beatles, Rolling Stones, that magic happens. And there's hundreds of thousands of bands where that never happens. There's always one good player and maybe a few people that just don't really cut it. But, it was magical. For lack of a better word. And I got lucky.
The whole was greater than the sum of the parts.
Exactly. And I got lucky by finding those guys. And it was really, really, I look back in very fond memory of all that.
Now with God's Balls, the first 500 records came with a manzine.
Yeah. It did.
What is a manzine?
We'll be back after these messages.
Hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VinylGuide10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VinylGuide10.
Now we return to the program, already in progress.
No limits.
Now with God's Balls, the first 500 records came with a manzine.
Yeah, it did.
What is a manzine? I haven't been able to find one of those. So,
well, it was a tongue-in-cheek fanzine about being a man and how to be a man, and and just doing manly things. And it was, I think Bruce Pavitt found this guy to begin with, and some guy from back east New York, some kid. And he was putting it out, and he says, we got to put this in your record as an extra thing. And they're all about Sub Pop early on was all about confrontation and challenging people's thoughts, and just doing stuff that other people weren't doing. I mean, that's kind of what was so fun about it. So that fanzine called Manzine wound up being in the first 500, like you said, and it pissed off a lot of women. There were some, equality rights activists that were really upset about it, and for God knows what reason. I mean, it's very tongue in cheek, but that was the beauty of it, is like people would take it seriously, and they created more hype for the record by proxy of just, talking about it negatively,
Sure.
It worked to our advantage in many ways.
Now, in that first pressing of God's Balls, there's the first 500 came with a manzine. The first 2,000 came with a poster. And that poster featured you. As a record collector, a lot of times we'll get records that originally came with a poster, but very few, we find very few records with those posters because people hung them on the wall. There are also records that, we almost always find the poster in because no one was interested in hanging that poster on the wall. In God's Balls, it's very difficult to find a poster, meaning that a lot of people hung them onto walls. I guess, what was your reaction to then having you on all these people's walls?
Well, at first I'm like, no, I remember talking with Bruce and John. It's like, no, I don't want this to be about me anymore. I want it to be about the band. And in fact, I even fought them on the idea of calling the band TAD. We wanted to call it Total Audio Destruction, which is like, the initials, but they said, no, you got to call the band TAD. And, we went with it because it was working, and I don't regret it at all. It was a great idea. But where was I? Geez, I had a lot of coffee today. I'm going all over the place.
Well, you were the visual focus of the band and likely garnering the most attention. I imagine interview requests, and everyone were always, let's get TAD, let's get the big guy for this one. Did that focus impact the other members of the band or the unity of the group?
No, I mean, they're very supportive. I think that I would always try to give some of the interviews, and like Kurt and I did a lot of the interviews together, Kurt Daniels and I, and he is very witty, and he's well-read, hyper intelligent guy. And, Gary just wanted to play guitar, and Steve just wanted to play drums, but Kurt had something to say, and he was instrumental in, a lot of the mythos behind the band, and, the Dick Johnson thing. And, here's the truth. We both cut cordwood, being in the Pacific Northwest. He, we're marketed as lumberjacks gone bad, and playing music. And, but there is truth to that. But I wasn't a lumberjack, and neither was he, but we both had experience in cutting cordwood. And it was, a job that I had in the summer months to prepare people to have their wood for burning in the winter. He similarly worked at a butcher shop as well, in Stanwood, Washington. He was the cleanup guy, and he'd take the saws apart and clean everything. And, so we both have that experience together. So again, I'm lost here. I forget where I was going. Oh yeah, I know where I'm going now. It's like, they were very supportive, and I tried to share that with them as much as possible, the interviews and stuff. And I initially I was really, I didn't want to have it just be about me, for sure. And I think that I've made it clear that it wouldn't have been what it was without the rest of the guys. Right. That's for sure. But I mean, that's what people wanted to do, and that a lot of that was Sub Pop's marketing plans, and it worked.
After God's Balls, you guys went in to record what became the Salt Lick EP with Steve Albini. Why was that an EP and not another full-length album?
Well, as I recall, it was pretty close to, maybe within a year of God's Balls being out. And we just wanted to coincide it with being out on tour. So, it wasn't like we were flying out to record a record in Chicago with Steve Albini. And that it was more of a thing of planning and convenience and, just maximizing the whole thing with dollars. And, we're out here. Let's make this happen on our tour. And we only spent 2 days in the studio with him to make that record. And we had other songs that were outtakes. And we just decided not to use them because they weren't up to snuff,
Mm-hmm.
And that's key. I think, we never wanted to put out stuff that wasn't, that we weren't jazzed about. And certainly stuff that we had any questions like, I don't feel good about this, But it wound up being an EP, but there were other songs and we released them on other stuff and that were good. And some of it will never see the light of day just because it just wasn't up to snuff.
In the career, you've worked with some amazing producers. Jack Endino, of course, Steve Albini, Butch Vig. Now you own your own studio and you're recording other bands. What did you learn from those guys, and what do you leverage from those guys in your time with them that you use currently in your recording life?
Well, a lot of the things I learned was interactions with musicians from all those guys. More than anything, I wasn't really. I didn't know that I was going to be doing the audio engineering thing at that time. I certainly was interested, but it seemed way too technical for me. And since then, I've really gone deep into it, and I enjoy it. It's another aspect of nerdery that I really enjoy. But just the interactions of how their styles and how they would get the best performances out of the bands they were working with, and that was my experiences with my band. I wasn't in sessions with a lot of other bands and watching them work, but I'm very aware of what I'm doing and where I'm at. I try to take in things as best I can, and the way they, just their attitude towards things. I remember the first time I went to record with Endino. It was at Reciprocal, and I had 3 dirt boxes daisy chained together. I had a Proco Rat. I had a Fuzz Face and a Big Muff, and I think even a original heavy metal distortion by Boss. The black metal pedal. And he came out and looked at them. And he started twiddling the knobs, and I'm like, "Hey, what? Hey, what are you doing?" And he says, "There's no fundamental tone here. It just sounds like gears." And I'm like, "Exactly. That's the way I want it to sound, and that's why I wanted to do it that way." So, I love that story about him. It's like, he's got his ideas. He wants to make things sound the way he wants to hear them, and that's why you want to work with somebody, is because they have a vision. But I had a vision too that wasn't necessarily jiving with his, but we kind of met each other halfway and made some records.
Yeah.
And I love that guy dearly. He's an amazing person, and one hell of an engineer as well. And Albini was he had a different thing. He's like, don't think about it too much, just do it. And if you're in this studio, he was kind of a hard ass at the time. I remember saying something like, if you're here and you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting our time. You're wasting both of our time. And we had songs, but some of them were still being fleshed out. And he didn't have any problem saying, that sucks, or no, we're not going to do that. He's kind of a headstrong guy. I think he's since then mellowed out, but that was early in his recording career. And we were staying at his house in Chicago. And so it was, and then going to Butch, we adored Butch because a lot of our favorite records were made by him, the Scratch Acid records. I believe it was Scratch Acid, Killdozer, a lot of the Touch and Go stuff was recorded by Butch. And I loved Killdozer, and I still do. And they're still, I still tout them as being a huge influence. And he had a different way of working, and he was very mellow, and he had his methods, and he really helped me with my singing a lot, because Albini said to me, he says, Tad, you can't sing. Don't even try. And I'm like, okay, well, that's your opinion. So, I moved on, and I go, if somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm going to bust my fucking balls to do it and prove them wrong. That's the kind of guy I am. And it's more of a personal challenge anyway. It's like, so, Butch had a really great style of helping me with the vocals. And we spent more time on that than we did on a lot of other records. It's like, I think we made God's Balls in like 2 days or something, all 10 songs plus some outtakes and some others that were used for other stuff.
Right.
Salt Lick, same way, 6 songs. We actually recorded 8 to 10 songs with Albini, and we wound up using just 6. And Butch, it was a different experience because he had his watch set to 5 o'clock every day, and when his watch went off, that's when he knew it was time to stop and go get a beer at a local tavern. And that's what he did. He's like, okay, it's time to go get a beer, So they do that. And there'd been a couple of times when I didn't go, and I stayed and messed with my sound. And that's how I came up with Jinx, is they were on a lunch break getting beers at a bar, and they'd come back an hour and a half later, and I had that song ready to go when they came back. So, I mean, I very much like to be in the creative zone, and when I'm in it, I can go far with it. But Butch was very encouraging of that, and he says, "Well, let's record it." And I started playing the riff to the guys, and they're like, "Oh yeah, let's do this." So we tracked it, and that became one of the songs on that record.
The opener, in fact.
Yeah, it worked out good.
So for 8-Way Santa, we as record collectors, we need to talk about the cover, because that's that is a collectible in itself. The cover art was from a found picture, as I understand, from a thrift store that was, I think Poneman said, yes, let's put that picture on the album cover. At that point, nobody thought that it may raise any issues.
Right. And it shouldn't have. The way we saw it, the band saw it, the way SubPop saw it, is that if you're going to, a friend of ours found it in the thrift store in Ballard neighborhood in Seattle. She bought it for the photo album, right? Didn't want the photos, but she found a few in there that were like really awesome, and that was one of them. And we go, oh man, we got to have this for our why don't we use this for our record cover? Kurt and I, and we showed it to Gary and Steve, and they're like, oh yeah, this looks cool. And so we brought it to Bruce and John. And Bruce lost his mind. He just immediately fell in love with it. He's like, oh, this is so good. So the art department put together some treatments on it. long story short, we put out the record with that cover, and it was doing really good. I remember hearing that I don't know what the numbers are, but it was getting ready to go indie gold, whatever the hell that means.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got a letter from some attorney that said, the rest is history. I don't even want to talk about it. It's kind of it's a pain in my ass,
right?
How that turned out. And I do know that since then, the woman that really raised the biggest stink when she went and saw her face on a cover of a record in a part of a life she doesn't want to remember in a Tower Records,
mm-hmm.
she was very upset and emotional. And, I get it. I understand, you're horrified when you think, A, how did this band get this photo? And B, why are they putting it on a cover with my ex, who I'm no longer with, grabbing my breast? It's just probably insanely upsetting to her.
Mm-hmm.
But, that completely stopped the production of the record, and SubPop had to recall them to comply with the wishes of this person, because they had us. We didn't own the originals, and so it was difficult. But since then, I found out that the woman, she didn't. If she known that it was going to really ruin things as much as they did for us, she probably wouldn't have been such up in arms about it.
Mm.
And her daughter, I guess, ran into a friend of ours and intimated that she was deeply sorry that happened to the band, and it really did. I mean, SubPop reeled it back. They put out an alternate cover, but at that time the momentum was lost for that record. We were out on tour and playing shows, and the record's being recalled, and it just, a lot of money was thrown away because of that, and it was difficult.
In that photo album that was found in the thrift store, were there other pictures of the same people in there? That was just one of a handful that was the funniest one to pick.
Yes, there was many photos. In fact, it seemed to be more of a wedding album, because there was photos of the guy with the handlebar mustache in a blue leisure suit with bell bottoms, and that we were considering that as well. Some of those photos, but it's
mm-hmm.
we're just glad we didn't get sued for more photos. So used one. So there you go.
It sounds very similar to Dead Kennedys with the band picture on the back of Fresh Fruit. I mean, it's almost the exact same story. They found it at a garage sale, and the original band discovered it, and then they had to go through a whole series of different cover arts after that.
Yeah.
So you did have the 1-2 punch with the Jack Pepsi, or can we even say the word Pepsi? Is that
you can?
I can. Okay,
you can.
There was the Tad logo that appeared to be on to leverage the Pepsi logo, and you got a cease and desist from the Pepsi company. Did they just want you to stop using it, or were they actually asking for monetary damages as well?
I think they just wanted us to stop associating their product with alcohol and bad decision making, because the song, originally called Jack Pepsi, associated whiskey drinking and mixing Jack Daniels with Pepsi Cola. So I think that's where they had issue.
Okay.
And being a good Christian, family-oriented business as they were, I'm saying that with extreme prejudice and malice. They decided that wasn't serving their brand. And to my, I kept thinking, like there's all these bands. That was kind of a thing that people did then. Melvin's had the Hot Wheels logo they used from Mattel. Urge Overkill had the Union 76 logo that they used. None of those people got sued. So whatever, things happen.
I didn't even realize until now that you actually changed the name of the song as well. So it's now just Jack. Okay. Pulled out all references.
Yeah. And that's what they wanted. That was part of the agreement. They served a phone book sized, 3-inch thick document to SubPop that said, don't do this anymore. And, or we'll squash you like a bug, but, whatever.
Now, do you control much or all of TAD music?
I control a portion of it. Yes.
Okay.
We wrote as a band after that's how we got things done too, is we gave each other cuts, the whole thing, because it was a group effort. I think largely the song structure, bones and meat were mostly me and Kurt, and then Gary had some great additions, and Steve contributed his portion. But we cut each other as 25% each. And Steve quit the band while we were recording 8-Way Santa. So that put another wrench in the works too. I mean, we were out on tour and we were recording with Butch Vig. And he says, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. He didn't like touring. It was a bummer for him. He didn't feel good. It's not made for everybody, sitting in a van, with long hours and all that with 3 other guys is not a fun thing for a lot of people. And it certainly wore on Steve. And I said, okay, Steve, but we've got more songs to record, or if you're going to quit, I'm going to play the drums. And he says, well, go ahead. And so we came back, and after lunch, and I started playing the drums for Stumbling Man, and he heard it. And I think he got kind of pissed and jealous at the same time and decided to come down and finish the record with us. But as soon as we got back to Seattle, he was done. He's like, I don't want to be in this band anymore. And I'm like, well, Steve, if you're not going to support the vision, I mean, we can't really cut you in on future stuff. It's only right. So, I mean, that diverted to just back to Gary, Kurt, and I. So
right
at that point, things became a greater share for us and less for him.
So albums like Inhaler, Infrared Riding Hood, is there any potential of vinyl repressings on those? I know those were only pressed once back in the day, and those are now collector's items. Any hope to see those repressed on vinyl in the future? Well,
Infrared Riding Hood, oddly enough, was put out by a reissue was put out by a European label. I don't remember what country, and then I found out about it by somebody posted it on Facebook and said, "Are you aware of this?" And it startled me. And then I talked to Kurt Danielson, and we said, "What's up with this?" And we were trying to figure out who and how this happened, but it was re-released on marbled blue vinyl, and it looks amazing. It looks just like the original, except it had some, different. The vinyl was 180 grain, I believe, or something. It was really nice. And I think Elektra, who was the parent label, Warner Elektra, Atlantic, they made a licensing deal with some label who put it out. And because we were still unrecouped at that time, I mean, we get mechanical royalties and whatnot, and should be getting sales royalties, but I don't think there was that many of them made.
Right. It's
I don't know.
I'm looking it up.
We're
Music
kind
on Vinyl put it out. And those are actually collectible, right? And that blue one you talked about is well north of $100 these days.
Yeah.
So that was all done without you guys knowing, without your involvement, and they're able to do that because they still have the rights or the access to the masters.
Well, because the business of music is it's a business, you know. Has nothing to do with art. Never has.
Oh, there's also a reissue of Inhaler on Real Gone Music.
Really? I didn't know that either.
Yeah, vinyl LP edition, special edition, tan, black, and red swirl, July 2021. Album jacket, limited to 3,000 copies, exclusive to Record Store Day 2021.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, I do remember that.
Okay.
It's kind of confusing when you got so many records and different decades that they're being put out.
Yeah. And that's why I was asking, like, do you control the music? Are you able to help steer when there's repressings, when additional copies are made, that sort of thing?
Well, I do believe that there is a copyright statute of limitations on ownership, rights to things. That some law that happened in the 70s that is still in today, that the rights revert back to the artist. And I think we're about at that threshold now for a lot of these
30
records.
or 35 years or something. So you're pretty close.
Yeah. And once that happens, you know, we'll be in full control at that point.
Tell me about the album Live Alien Broadcasts. That was on a different label, Futurist.
Yeah, that was a label that we talked to for a while. That was when Giant dropped us from Inhaler. This guy wanted to put out records by us, and he believed in us, and he believed in the vision, and so we decided to put out a live record of some of the songs we've done, and we recorded it in a studio in Seattle. At the time, was called Lawson Productions, one of the bigger full facility recording facilities here in Seattle. And it was we brought a bunch of people in to watch us live, and we recorded live, and that's how that came about.
Yeah, and that one has not been reissued. And again, that is very collectible. I think vinyl versions of it from the original press. There's a red vinyl. Again, it's around $100 or more for a copy.
Yeah.
So you're quite collectible. I don't know.
Well, that's fantastic then.
So in terms of the upcoming projects, you have your classical compositions, Experiments of the Spectral Order. That just came out this year. People can check it out at thomasandrewdoyle.bandcamp.com. What other projects are you working on? Is there other releases for the coming months or year, do you think? We'll see.
Yeah, there's one I'm working on right now. I don't have a final title for it, but the working title is damn, it just slipped my mind. It's that good that I don't remember it. And just so you know, there's two experiments of the spectral order. There's one that's older and one that's newer. They're volume 1 and 2, and then there's two other full-length records on there as well that people can find. And the new one's tentatively called Forgotten Sciences. So that's going to be an epic thing that it's a big undertaking I've been working on for a year and a half. It's a 45-minute song with no breaks, so I don't see it getting on vinyl, but maybe there's a way to do it.
Right.
And I'm playing guitar and drums and vocals and synths and stuff. It's got a lot of depth to it, and I'm really excited about that one coming out.
Do you, when you're doing your instrumental, your classical compositions, do you start with an idea or an emotion and then build on that? Or are you experiment? Like, how do you, because I guess when you write a song, generally there's a topic, especially verse, chorus, verse. There's something you're looking to achieve or discuss or ideate within that time. With classical music, with instrumental music, where does the idea germinate, and is that something that stays consistent throughout the creative process?
Well, I think that what's made this different, this stuff that I'm doing now, is it doesn't rely on known song structures, like you mentioned, verse, chorus, bridge, whatever, outro, that type of stuff. I don't write that way. I write with motifs and ideas that evolve. And it's basically just like starts as a thing. I'll like hear something on my head, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll have maybe a drum idea, and I'll get my phone and just start mouthing the drums into it. So I don't want to wake up my wife, and because she works a day job. So I got to be kind about that. But some of the ideas come to me in my sleep, and it'll startle me so much that I'll wake up and I'll jot it down. I'll write lyrics that way. And then I'll start tinkering with keyboards or drums or, any number of instruments. And it just evolves, and I'll sketch out ideas with a recorder, and then start editing and putting together and taking things out. It's a lot of like taking things away. You have an idea, you get it out, and then you start getting rid of things that aren't serving it. That's how I work these days. I don't rarely keep everything that I come up with. A lot of it is just like moving on to just keeping the stuff that really intrigues me and excites me.
Are you pretty disciplined? Do you are you in the studio at 8 a.m. and in there for several hours a day? What's your working routine like?
Well, funny you should ask. I typically wake up at about 3 or 3:15 a.m. and I will do some reading from bed, and then I'll get up, and usually I'm up and down in the studio by anytime from between 5 and 8 a.m. And I do this every day, and I'll work until the winter months. I'll work till maybe 6 or 7 at night. In the summer months, I'm up before the sun comes up, and I'm still working when it goes down. And it's an everyday thing. I get to do this. That's the way I look at it. I don't have to do this. I get to do it. And it's amazing for me. I love it.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. And again, Ted, thank you so much for spending time with us here and going a bit long and rehashing some of those old stories, but also talking about your current works. I've been a listener of your works for many, many years. And as I said, these classical compositions are really quite captivating. I found them very interesting. I want to encourage listeners to check out the works at thomasandrewdoyle.bandcamp.com. There's one on vinyl, Incineration Ceremony. It was put out in 2018, I believe. You could find copies of that online as well. And some of the other works, Experiments of the Spectral Order, volumes 1 and 2, and of course the upcoming works. Follow thomasandrewdoyle.bandcamp.com, and you'll get notified whenever there's more music available. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing those stories and that perspective. And I wish you all the best, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Nate. Can I just add one thing?
Sure, please.
All right. So you mentioned classical music, and I like to let people know that don't let that fool you. It's there are elements of classical instruments, but it's by no means the boring bullshit that you've heard, in my opinion. And I love classical music. There's a lot of composers I do, but I like to think of it as dark wave symphonic soundtrack type of stuff. And I'm going to be writing soundtracks I've already got one that's coming up, and I did the soundtracks for fundamentally cynical. God, I can't even say it. It's a popular animated series that was on Amazon, and I think it's on the IMDb now, so you can check that out too.
Excellent. I'll put links to that in this episode page.
Thank you so much, Nate.
No worries. Thank you, Ted. Again, I really do appreciate the time, and best of luck, man.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Cheers.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, there we go. What a wonderful, lovely gentleman, Mr. Thomas Andrew Doyle. Of course, thomasandrewdoyle.bandcamp.com is where you get all his new music. And of course, if you want to hear more of this interview, go to patreon.com/Vinyl Guide. Subscribe, help support the show, and get all the extras. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share these episodes on your social media. Share them out on Facebook, tweet them out on Twitter. Tell your friends all about The Vinyl Guide. That's a huge help. And if you have a few extra minutes, hop up there on Apple, iTunes, or wherever you get these podcasts and leave The Vinyl Guide podcast a positive review. 5 out of 5 or 10 out of 10 stars. Say something nice. That is always appreciated. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.
That's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Send your thoughts to Nate at thevinylguide.com or follow or tag us on Instagram at Vinyl Guide. Until next time, keep spinning.